All right. Welcome to Coast, a show where we speak about all things data security in the Microsoft stack. My name is Beau and I am a technical specialist at Microsoft. I'm joined today by my co-host Lou McCurry. Lou, how is everything going in your world?
Everything's awesome, Bo. I'm also a technical specialist, but based on the East Coast over here in Melbourne, doing pretty much what Bo does, but not as well. How have you been?
Well, now that I got that compliment, I'm doing quite well actually. So there's a lot going on recently. So
Yeah.
this is spun back up on I guess I created a newsletter on LinkedIn with the AI message and everything that's going on. We've had a lot of interest in spinning Coast to Coast back up. So you'll see there's been about a 6-month break since our last recording. Now that there's a lot more news and everything related to AI, we're trying to spin that back up. So I recently put out a LinkedIn poll on what topics that people wanted us to cover, and the winner was data security in the era of AI. So we're looking at creating a series on the different topics that we cover into that as they fit into the data security narrative, now that there's been a massive adoption in those AI technologies. And it's something I've been speaking about with all of my customers, and people across the world have a lot of questions about it. So today, we're going to walk you through a high-level introduction onto what this might look like, and I'll hand over to Lou to walk us through it.
Yeah, thanks, Bo. Look, I've got the slides up, and in terms of what's been going on since we last got together, like you, lots and lots of conversations around the impact of generative AI and the rapid pace of change. And this slide that we're looking at, I think, brings this home. If you look to the far left of this slide and just look at the numbers, it took 16 years for smartphone usage to get to 100 million users, and then contrast that with what we're all seeing and feeling today with ChatGPT as the example here, 2 months to get to 100 million users.
Yep.
We're all feeling it, this rapid pace of change, the fact that we're all having to adapt and, learn new stuff, but also learn how to use the new stuff because, we all want this stuff on the far right. We're looking to generative AI to help us unleash creativity, unlock productivity, and all that wonderful stuff that, this new future promises us. But with that, we've introduced, or we actually recognize, a bunch of new risks. And in fact, what we're seeing here is the result of some surveys we've had with customers, and I'm seeing this in our conversations. If we break down our concerns, there's really 3 main areas. The first one is just the lack of controls that some of us are experiencing around what kind of data is being shared with AI. These are fears that we have around the lack of controls to govern the data shared with AI. It's one thing to stop information moving into some of these AI solutions. It's another thing to say, well, once they're there, how well are they being, once the information's in these solutions, how well is that being managed and governed? And then, of course, on the far right, we're waiting for the lawmakers to catch up. It's inevitable. So there's a bunch of regulatory requirements that are applicable today. This is another area of massive change. We're going to see a massive impact here. And I suspect it's the same with your customers, Bo.
It's the same, yeah. Like I think you'd be very naive to assume there's not going to be regulations coming out even local to Australia. Like, let's think of, even already there's been the EU AI Regulation Act and stuff like that as well, where they're already thinking about this stuff. We've already got rules, we've already got regulations in place. You'll also quickly see other areas, other regulations that are already covering other workloads start covering some of the AI stuff as well.
I'm going to apologize for my dog barking in case you can hear that coming through, but we'll press on. He's excited too with all of this AI talk. So, look, the other thing we're doing is coming on the back of this is breaking down some of these risks and fears into some more specific scenarios that we'll sort of introduce today, but then come back to over the course of subsequent episodes and dig deeper and have a look at that. But, the overarching one here is, the insufficient visibility into the usage of AI applications. There's a sense that we're working in the dark here. And because of that lack of visibility, we've got this risk of data leakage. We've got the risk of oversharing. This is a slight distinction from that first example, because with oversharing, the concern is not, in this case, about exfiltration of that data. It's what's happening within our organizations between different parts of the business. We're moving, in this case, Project X is surfacing information to people who shouldn't be seeing information around Project X. And then the last one's an interesting one. people using all these powers for good, using them for evil instead, right? So how can we leverage, even when AI is being sanctioned and it's being managed, how do we keep track of people making use of this for perhaps some non-compliant usage? We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and you can see that out in the industry already, right? Like deep fakes, like there's already been instances where people have used an AI model to create a deep fake of a CEO. That CEO
Mm.
has been deep faked over a voice call. They've called through to finance. They've sent an email from a spoof domain. They've then asked for them to approve that document. For the
Yep.
person on the phone from finance, this person sounds the same. They've got the same inflection in their voice. They have the same way that they talk. How would you know any different? So on top of these technical controls that we're speaking about now, people do need to look into some process controls on how to actually manage some of those approvals now that these things occur. And I think the other thing to call out on that previous slide as well is that these issues already existed, right? There was always data leaks, there was always data oversharing, there was always non-compliance usage. It's now also just applied to AI workloads rather than them being completely new issues that didn't exist previously.
Good points. I should have waited for you, Beau, but we'll
No,
go to
it's
the
all
next
good.
slide now. Look, and this slide was up a little bit while you were there talking. For those of you
Yeah.
sort of being distracted by it, you probably recognize this concept of a shared responsibility from forever when it comes to our cloud services. The concept is not new. It's the idea that as a provider on the far right, in the best case, if you like, scenario for us, you're using our SaaS offering. In this case, we're talking about our co-pilots. And because of that, the responsibility for the compute infrastructure, the model training, the design implementation, et cetera, working the bottom way up here, all the stuff in blue, lays with us at Microsoft. There is some shared responsibility. These are the gray bars on the far right around the plugins and data connections, the data security and governance, and the identity and access management. And really that shared responsibility is the stuff that Beau and I speak to pretty much every day. It's the green, it's the yellow stuff on the far right. It's about how do we protect and govern that data using the Purview solution suite. Because just like the shared responsibility model with other solutions, we support and build the capability to do things like protect and govern your data, label, DLP, etc. But it comes down to the users of our services to actually configure those policies and deploy them.
Yeah. And I think one of the main reasons for that is every business is different, right? Like if we gave you a bunch of default policies for, let's say, labels, that's not going to fit every single use case that you actually have in your organization. So that's why we give you the tools. You need to do your own analysis, your own investigation, your own evaluation onto how they fit into your actual workloads, and then build and deploy them from there.
Yeah. And for those of you who've just joining us, when we're talking about Purview, of course, we're not talking about a product. We're talking about a collection of solutions that make up the Purview solution family. So that spans data security, all the DLP, insider risk management, information protection, adaptive protection capabilities, bottom left, all the way through data map for data governance, and on the far right-hand side around risk and compliance management with e-discovery, compliance management, et cetera, et cetera. The point of this slide is that it's a breadth of solution that covers your end-to-end data platform. When we speak to AI, we've got that same concept of breadth. We're talking about not just Microsoft Copilot right in the center of this slide, but also third-party AI solutions and enterprise-built AI on the left-hand side here. So the intention here is not to constrain people in terms of what they can and can't use. It's about providing capability that spans across no matter what you're using and what level of risk that introduces. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a bit of an intro to subsequent episodes where we're going to cover off 4 specific scenarios in a bit of detail. But I thought today, Beau, we'd walk through each of those 4 scenarios and talk about them a little bit as a setup for the subsequent sessions. Yep. And the very first one here is the most common. It's an employee accidentally leaking data into a non-Microsoft Gen AI app. So the incident itself, we've got an employee who has somehow managed to drop sensitive information into a third-party Gen AI app. As a consequence of that, sensitive data has been leaked. And as a response to that, within the organization, we've locked down the use of anything AI, which, is understandable but unfortunate.
And it happens all the time.
Yeah. And this does feel like, I know we were talking earlier about, this conversation feels like the early days of SaaS applications, where we had that concept of shadow IT and sanctioned apps versus unsanctioned apps, and how do we deal with this stuff? Let's block it all, right? And the problem with blocking everything, of course, is people find their way around it, and then you have that risk of that shadow IT, if you like.
And it's not scalable either, right? Like when we spoke about shadow IT, an organization and those users use thousands of apps. So if we sanction 12, 15 apps that the organization can actually use, people found ways around it. The same sort of thing will happen with AI and LLM models. You'll block them. People will find a way to get around it if you're not going to enable them to have that same sort of functionality in a secure way.
Yeah. And if you look at the bottom right of this slide, the problem with blocking all of that is that you're locking your employees out of the benefits of these sort of solutions, and potentially putting your business at a competitive disadvantage as well. So, the issues that we've got in this incident on the left here is we don't have visibility on what people are doing with AI. Excuse me, we don't have any protections in place either. And once that information moved into these applications, the application we're using doesn't have any built-in control. So the solution to this is, as you would expect, a lot of good Microsoft capability, a lot of which you guys watching, and I say you guys non-gender specific or inclusive, of course, but you people watching are probably already using a lot of this capability with one possible exception, which is AI Hub. And we'll speak to that in a bit of detail in a sec. So look, in terms of getting visibility, how do we know what's going on? AI Hub is your first port of call. This is going to be the ability to get some activity monitoring, define policy. I'll give you a sneak peek in a minute. We introduced the protections with DLP, of course, and the two Copilot icons represent a preference, if you like, of actually using a sanctioned Copilot AI application. The reason we're talking about it a lot these days is because it natively inherits all of your security, your compliance, and privacy controls. So it's not bolt-on. It's, all the controls we're about to see are kind of already there to manage your Copilot interactions. And as I mentioned with AI Hub, this is the one of the screens there. It's in public preview right now, Beau. And so
it is,
essentially that means it's available to everybody. It's in your consoles as we speak. In this case, we're seeing in the top left quadrant a breakdown of sensitive data that's actually included within prompts. So in the blue, we're seeing a lot of credit card numbers being punched into AI prompts. We're not sure why yet, but they are. And I think the second biggest hit is US Social Security numbers. And if you look at the top right quadrant, you'll see that the total number of prompts and sensitive data and the destinations. So this is that visibility we were talking about. A lot of usage of Google Bard in this example, ChatGPT coming in a close second, and you can see the breakdown of the sensitive information moving into those solutions. Is that problematic? Okay. Bottom left, we're seeing the breakdown of the number of users between those using Copilot and those using other AI assistants. And then bottom right, we've got the breakdown of the users across the different AI assistants. There's more to this than just this analytics page, and we'll come back to AI Hub in subsequent episodes, but really this is your very first port of call in terms of just getting visibility over what's going on.
And obviously when we spoke about DLP, that can be done via this in policies as well. We'll go into it a little bit deeper, but all of the controls that we speak to as they pertain to AI, you're probably using today. Sensitivity labels, you're probably using today. Data loss prevention, you're probably using today. It's just applying those technologies into AI workloads so you get visibility and control as to what's actually being fed into it.
Exactly. Then we move into the second scenario. In this case, getting a bit more interesting because an employee in this case is hunting around for sensitive information that's actually not protected. So this is an example of somebody actually using Copilot because Copilot does a good job of actually responding to those prompts, finding that information you're looking for. And, as far as the, security is concerned, well, if the user has access and is authorized, then Copilot's acting within that context and it will give you that answer very efficiently. But in this case, the user's taken that response and leaked it externally. The problem, once again, is that we don't have any visibility over what is happening in the organization in terms of those prompts. The prompts themselves, the responses are not constrained because the original content is not protected. The prompt response is going to reflect that. And then, of course, for the exfiltration to the press here, we don't have any DLP in place or label inheritance. The solution for this scenario is, once again, come back to AI Hub for that visibility. AI Hub also will inform and help you create the information protection and DLP policies that we're seeing on this slide as well. So it's not just a static dashboard. It can actually be the beginning of your response to solutions like this. The third scenario is we've got some inadvertent challenges around personal data being exposed. So once again, we're using Copilot, but this time around, the user is asking for a summary of data that contains some customer data, credit card numbers. Not necessarily malicious in this case. This is a user doing their work, and like a lot of us, they're discovering new ways of doing that using some of the Copilot capabilities. So we get the response, but in this case, the response itself is actually sensitive. So not only is the source material sensitive, but the response itself is sensitive. But because it's not protected and not picked up as being sensitive, the user can take that response and hit print and whatever else they need to do with that. Now, printing in itself, not necessarily a challenge, but in the world of remote work, so on and so forth, should I be able to print out something sensitive on my home printer and leave it on my kitchen bench? Yeah. And perhaps, for neighbors, whoever else to see it, the drill here. So what are the challenges here that give rise to the incidents or the shortcomings? And it's a similar story here, right? We need visibility into those prompts to know that there's a problem to begin with. Auto labeling is the answer in terms of those prompt responses. So when that sensitive information comes back from Copilot, if it's sensitive, we need it protected. And if it's protected, DLP can come back and deal with that. And the solutions, the way we map the solutions to those capabilities is as per the screen. And look, Beau, to your point earlier, no surprises on this screen. Once again, with the exception of AI Hub, this is capability we've always had. It's a new lens, right, where we're applying to AI scenarios, if you like.
Yeah, and it follows the same model we've always used: discover your data, protect your data, then govern your data. So we need to find where that information's going. AI Hub allows us to do that. We then want to protect that information, whether that's sensitivity labels with information protection or data loss prevention controls. And then obviously, as not part of this, but we want to look at the governance of that data, retention, management, things like that, long term as well.
Well put. And the last one, lucky last. And actually, for me, it's actually a really interesting one because we've actually moved from all the inadvertent sort of slobby user type of thing and, accidental exposure. This is someone who's actually been quite deliberate. So it's a user using Copilot to do what it does best, rephrase this email so that it doesn't sound like insider trading. Copilot does this work very well. The user takes that response, tries to cover their tracks by deleting the original prompt within Copilot itself, and then uses that response over Teams internally in what is, in this case, an example of some insider trading. So similar shortcomings that give rise to this incident. There's no visibility over these sorts of prompts or these sort of behaviors. We need some. How do we counter the problem of people covering their tracks in Copilot? We need retention. We need to hang on to these Copilot prompts because we may need them further down the track when we're doing some forensics or some investigation into these user behaviors. And of course, we need to have in place auditing or collection in place for those interactions themselves. And the solution set this time around, there's no AI Hub, but communication compliance, something I must confess, not a lot of my customers are really using. which saddens me because it's amazing. It's the tool that would actually, in this scenario, pick up that initial prompt into Copilot because it looks dodgy. It is something which is a bit of a signal to some insider risk or insider threat, if you like. So we pick up that kind of prompting with communication compliance. We can then manage the deletion of the original prompt using retention policy within data lifecycle management. And then for the investigation part, which is what's happened, what's going on, who else are we colluding with, so on and so forth, we're going to leverage auditing and e-discovery. They're all connected because we actually kick off the e-discovery case from communication compliance, in fact, where we begin the investigation and then escalate that and send that initial investigation over to e-discovery and then dig deeper where we're looking for things like collusion and so on and so forth. So a lot to talk about in this one. And again, it's still important that we're using Copilot for M365 because all these controls are built in, and you'll see once we get to the demos themselves, we're actually going to be leveraging Copilot. We'll have visibility of Copilot natively within these solutions. There's no add-ons to do, no updating or anything like that. It's already there before we go any without having to do a whole lot of extra work.
Yeah, and I think the key thing we want to raise in this introduction into these scenarios as well is every element of Purview is used with these AI workloads. There's no real part of Purview that can't touch any of the workloads. Comms compliance does it. Like I said here, data lifecycle management, e-discovery do it. Insider risk looks into those workloads, sensitivity levels, DLP. You've even got things within the AI hub now, let's say the EU AI Act. So when those get uploaded in things like Compliance Manager, for example, that automatically integrates into AI Hub and shows you where you're tracking on that as well. So don't think of Purview as a separate conversation piece to the AI workloads. It should be the one-stop shop to able to go through and configure your controls to get your visibility to build out those workloads in your organization.
Yep. And for some of you, it's revisiting capability you've already got, to your point. So the plan is, in terms of more coming soon, is that in subsequent episodes, and we're planning to go every 2 weeks now, Beau, fortnightly.
Yep. There's so more than enough for us to cover.
Awesome. We're going to come back to each of those 4 scenarios. And for each of them, we're going to go into some user experience. What does it look like for the user? What's the admin experience like? How do I actually build out these policies? What's the effect of the policies? A bit of a deeper dive and have a look look at each of those individual solutions. So that's 4 of them. We'll probably finish up with a 5th specific around Copilot for M365 and the sort of controls we can bring in with SharePoint, advanced management, and some other controls as well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot coming. In the meantime, Beau, I know you've got some new stuff to show as well and talk about, so I'll stop sharing and throw it back to you.
I've got a couple of things. So one thing I want to cover, and this was announced at Build, is that we can start using Purview capabilities in a few different areas as well. So we can use them now in Copilot Studio, and that's in public preview. And shortly, it will also be applicable into Azure AI Studio. So keep that in mind when you're actually building out these LLMs and what you're looking at within your own organizations. We can now move Purview controls into those. You'll quickly see, and from what we're seeing internally as well, Purview is also going to be kind of that umbrella protection across the AI workloads. They're already built into the majority of them, so the more that we can expand, the better it's going to be.
Seeing labels in Loop.
Yes. So some of that stuff's coming up as well, so you'll see it'll be everywhere, right? It's not going to be avoiding it. The other thing that I will quickly bring up my screen to show is...
so good.
Yeah, there's a couple of portals. So the old Purview portal or the legacy portal, and it's still being used today, is at compliance.microsoft.com. It's the old name. It's a bit slower. It's not as modern. As of, I think it's next month off the top of my head, this portal at purview.microsoft.com will be moving to GA. So you'll be able to jump in and start using this portal rather than the legacy portal.
And by that toggle on the top right, we're not forcing this change on anybody, of course. You can opt in, opt back out, try it for a bit, change your mind.
100%. So even if you turn this portal on and you jump in here, if you go to compliance.microsoft.com, it'll still take you back to that legacy portal. And the thought process behind this, and you'll quickly see here in terms of when we're looking at some of the core things, when we look at some of the risk and compliance capabilities. You'll see under data governance that the data catalog is there. And for those of us that don't really tie into the, I guess, data science sort of thing with Fabric and Purview within Azure, we're trying to bring all of those things together so that you have one place for holistic data protection across your organization. So data catalog, it feeds into the Azure AI sort of thing, the Azure Purview sort of technologies, where we can look at extending labels and discovery to things like SQL databases, S3 buckets, that sort of thing. We're trying to have these all in that one-stop shop now. So you can see under solutions, it has everything. We've got data loss prevention, InfoProp, we've got the AI hub, there's a knowledge center that you can reach into. And there's also some related portals that you can jump to. If you have to go to Entra, if you have to go to Defender, if you have to go to Fabric to do any of the work that you're actually doing on a day-to-day basis, this is the portal that you'll go through. You can see even at the beginning when we jump in, we can see where some of this information is, some of the sensitive information types, recently accessed files. There's a lot of information in here that populates, and you can get a lot of telemetry in your organization and what's actually happening. So for those that haven't accessed this portal yet and had a playthrough, jump in there, enable it, have a look, get familiar with it. This will be the portal that we end up migrating to moving forward, and the old compliance portal will eventually go away. Don't have a time frame for that, but this portal seems to be more responsive. I enjoy using it more than the legacy portal anyway. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, no need to panic, but it's definitely, in my experience, much more responsive and easier to work with.
100%. So
you can use both. All right. I think we're good, Beau.
Yeah, so I guess that's all the time that we have for today. So we hope you found this information in this episode helpful. Keep an eye out for the Control Alt Data Security newsletter that I've spun up on LinkedIn. It'll have all the information from this session included in there, and I'll put the link to the actual data newsletter in the show notes as well. So I'll hand over to Lou to close this out.
Yeah, thanks, Beau. And I like the fact of actually tying this into your newsletter. So I think that's a good format. We do these sessions and then the complimentary newsletter there as well, and they're linked together. So if you don't catch us live on video, you can follow up on the newsletter as well.
Exactly.
Awesome work. All right, so thanks for joining, everyone. Don't forget to like, share, and everything else you need to do.
The old YouTube
subscribe. Subscribe is the other one, wasn't it? Like, share, and subscribe. I forgot that most important word. But yeah, it's good to be back. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks everyone. Bye.